What is good, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me again for another amazing episode of the SoulCast. This week I got Anthony McHale in the house. He's a long-term friend, collaborator, big fan of all of his stuff. He's got a new psychedelic project coming out very soon. It might actually be out by the time you guys hear this podcast. And we talk about everything. We talk about life after school, the pandemic, creativity, philosophy. He's a stand-up comedian as well, living in New York. So we talk about the stand-up comedy scene, all kinds of great creative stuff. So stay tuned for Soulcast episode 4, featuring Anthony McHale. This is the Soulcast episode number 1, 2, 3, 4, and I got my guy, the one and only Anthony McHale, back as a second appearance on the Soulcast. What's up, my brother? How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Dude, I'm chilling. I see you got that new facial hair flow going on.
Yeah, I always got to change it up, especially these days.
I like it, man. I fucking love it. Where you living now?
Yeah, I'm still in the city. I've been bouncing back and forth a little bit between here and upstate, but I've mostly been in the city, honestly.
Shit, man. I always thought it was wild that you were able to like move to the city after college, man, because that's like sort of one of the 2 or 3 places on earth that everybody in the music industry goes to. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like it's become such a hub and such a household name that like everybody's like, oh, you have to go to New York, go to LA, go to Nashville if you want to do something with music, or in your case, comedy, all kinds of entertainment stuff. So like let the people know like what you've been up to.
Yeah, I mean, like, to be fair, a lot of stuff's been going remote these days, so it's kind of like the whole world's turned into one big city at this point. But the city's been thriving. It's really been a place that's kicked back a lot of it. The comedy scene has definitely gone half remote, half just like yelling at people in parks and shit. So kind of hard to tell the difference between a comedian and a crazy homeless guy these days. But everything's going good. Yeah.
You've been screaming at a lot of people in parks, bro?
Every once in a while, sometimes it's not screaming. Sometimes it's more just like complaining to random people in the parks. But same thing, right?
But hey, you're getting like at least exposure or paid for it, man. I listen to people's complaints all day at the bank, and it's just free. Guys ain't even getting paid for that shit.
Well, at least hopefully they're funny. So
So, dude, man. So you just released an album, or at least you were in the process of releasing an album last time I
yeah,
talked to you, right?
just released an album, yeah,
Dude,
called "Looking Forward to the Past."
looking forward to the past. And it's sort of like I don't know. I got one of your demos a while back, and it was sort of like this experimental mix of like all different types. Like I noticed some hip hop in there, some folk, some experimental craziness. What exactly do you think is your inspiration for this project, or was your inspiration for this project?
A little bit of everything, honestly. I feel like half the songs were written like years ago and then just kind of polished up and finished now. And then the other half were written like purely in quarantine. So just kind of like inspired by the craziness of the world, but there's not like a lot of stuff directly about what's been happening, but just a whole mess of different inspirations, and the genres definitely come in from every angle in the album for sure.
Totally. I feel like that's the way the music's going right now. Is like it's sort of going in the direction of combining all these influences at once. You know, you look at like what's happening with country and rap music being blurred together, and country and rock and roll and hip hop. All of it's like blurring into one sort of internet music in a weird way. You know what I mean? Now,
Hmm.
do you have any like vocals on your album, or is it all instrumental?
Yeah, it's some of these songs are pure instrumentals. Some of them are vocals, a little bit of singing, a little bit of rapping. Some even just speaking and just spoken words. So just a little bit of everything, honestly. Yeah.
Damn, dude, that's fucking wild. And I know you were telling me that you were producing for a couple friends of yours too. You got
Hmm.
anything in the works with that going on?
Yeah. One of someone I've been producing with is possibly signed to a label soon, so that might be interesting. And
Ooh.
and definitely producing a bunch for Chester East Maine. So a lot of
Yeah,
good
dude.
stuff coming up on that front for sure.
Chester East Maine, I was super like I was blown away by the number of views they got, by the number of fans they got, man. So what's it like working with somebody who's like and again, no shade towards your own music. Your own music's
No,
fantastic. But
no.
what's it like working with somebody who's like gained a little bit of notoriety on top of making good music? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. It's good to have kind of like a baseline of what's expected when you go into the studio to start.
Mm.
So there's already a bit of groundwork that's been done. So it's just kind of like finding out where the artist is going to go with their direction and trying to make sure that they're not just like putting out something that they could have done without you. So just kind of like putting in your own flair, get your own influence in there for sure.
Totally, man. That's fucking dope. I really, I was thinking a lot about like the concept of success in entertainment. Not just music, but also comedy, entertainment in all different forms. And I was actually reading this book recently that I think you might actually like a lot, called "The Death of the Artist" by
Mm-hmm.
William Deresiewicz. And I mentioned it a couple times on the podcast, and this is something I want to talk with you specifically about because I know you're a philosophical dude. I know you're somebody who likes to think in cerebral form about the universe, just like me. And he sort of mentions a lot about how the music industry is sort of breaking apart into this fourth paradigm. We used to be artists, bohemians, where you just kind of wander around from town to town creating things. Or I'm sorry, artisans were the first one, wandering town to town creating things. Bohemians were like sort of the hipsters of the 1800s. And then we became professionals, and now he proposes that there's a new fourth paradigm that we're going into, which is producer. And I found that kind of interesting because it was like, it says a lot about where we're at as an industry. And I know you went to Oneonta for music industry just like me, and they taught a lot of sort of vague lessons. But I wanted to ask you something in particular. I had this prepared for when I came into this interview here. I was like, what do you think was missing from your education at Oneonta in the music field?
That's a good question. I feel like they definitely touched on a lot of subjects in vague. I don't know if they went in depth in some of the things that might have been a little bit more useful.
Mm.
I think one of the things that was definitely kind of left out a bit is like trying to make purposeful steps in different levels of the music industry, both in your actual creating of the music and where are you drawing your influences and how are you trying to put your influences into it so it doesn't just sound like a carbon copy.
Mm.
And then when you're trying to put out your music, how you're going to try to like impactfully put it out and not try to make it too, material or too corporate, and just trying to have it to be this, piece that people are really going to be able to understand and to be excited to hear.
That's yeah. I think that's the key too, man. Is like striking that balance, and it's the same way in comedy, right? It's like you don't want to just be the dude telling fart jokes that's been done 100,000 times, right? But you also don't want to be way past the edge of Bill Hicks doing some crazy cerebral shit that no one wants to listen to, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like that marriage in a weird way, right?
Yeah, you got to be somewhere in the middle. I mean, like if you are going to go to the edge, you got to be a pioneer in whatever you're going to edge like to the field of.
Mm-hmm.
But you also can't go too far off, or you just become like an insane person. Which,
It's a crazy, and
definitely.
now we're back full circle. The crazy guy wandering through the park, right?
Oh, there's always crazy people. That's a con.
Frank Gallagher wandering through the park, puking everywhere, man. Dude, speaking of which, man, I just got done. I know this is a pretty crazy change of topics here, but have you watched that show Shameless yet?
I've seen the first couple seasons. I haven't seen the most recent ones.
Bro,
But it was definitely great from what I've seen, honestly, for sure.
great show, man. I think I'm on season 8 right now, and I've been obsessed with it. And that's another thing I actually wanted to bring up was sort of the idea of the tortured artists. I know we touched on this the last time in the podcast too, and I sort of want to bring that back up. The idea of like somebody who's a savant in whatever they do, but they can't quite seem to get their shit together. They just keep stumbling through addiction to addiction, and they just can't quite get it right. It's and there's one scene in particular in Shameless that I was thinking of where um I think it was in one of the earlier seasons where Frank, this like ridiculous drunk asshole, like sits down at the piano and he's just like a virtuoso, you
Mm,
know, and he has that one moment of like amazing divine inspiration where he's not like a fumbling idiot, and
yeah.
then he like snaps right back into being a fumbling idiot, and I was thinking about that in terms of like what a lot of artists do is we sort of like accidentally stumble into this shit. Do you think that happens?
Oh, definitely. And it sometimes I feel like it's almost directly purposely made to seem like that. Sometimes when you get, creators like when you have things like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas
Mm.
and things like that, like a lot of those creators will just kind of like make this facade and make this idea of like this wild card when they might really be more of like a centered artist, but like that kind of makes the appeal. And sometimes that can build their story if you can have those elements. So it's something that a lot of people want in their art, is to have that kind of like pain and that torture and that back and forth. And then, even in music with like Kurt Cobain, you've got the tortured soul is the only thing that really puts that forward, because it's not like he's making these new steps in composition or theory. It's just that pure soul of it. But then you can go too far for sure and get like a Bukowski or whatever, the guys who are just like topping themselves off with their shotguns, at the end of the day. But they're still putting out great content, so how much can you blame them for that? But
For real, man. And you brought up a couple great examples there with Cobain, with Bukowski. One guy that pops to my mind is Gigi Allen when it comes to
yes,
like
he's an absolute pure artist, but also pure maniac.
just an animal, just somebody who is like who challenges every conception that we have of like what a human being is. I recently watched one of his clips the other day, and it was just
Mm.
fucking brutal. Like some of the shit that he does, man, is it like at least he did. He died, right?
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
brutal.
You were like, dude, he's been dead. There's no way that motherfucker was gonna live.
Yeah, and there's no way you wouldn't know if like there's no way he wouldn't be in the spotlight if he was alive right now.
Oh,
He,
dude, imagine how hard he would have been canceled in
yeah,
2020.
yeah. I don't know if you'd be able to cancel him though. I feel like he would just start like killing the people who canceled him. He was actually that crazy.
Oh, dude, easily. I remember what wasn't there a show that got shut down because he like face fucked some guy?
Yeah,
He,
and he was throwing feces at the crowd and
oh
everything. And
my god.
people would ask for that. People would show up hoping to get a little bit of Gigi Allen's poop on their face. That was their version of a merch T-shirt at that point.
It was a
That was
badge
probably
of honor.
yeah.
You'd hang up your shirt covered in his shit, like right on your mantle, just like this is the shirt I wore.
Yeah,
Gigi Allen covered me in his shit like a chimpanzee.
and that kind of like inspiration and how you end up with like some of the crazy artists like Eric Andre and shit like that, who are like direct influences, and then it starts with that crazy guy who is possibly a murderer, and we're still not sure about that. I mean, they never brought him to trial because I don't think he would show up for it, but
Uh-huh.
you
There's
never
no
know.
man, that's it's just it's wild the way like he I don't want people to think that like I condone that kind of behavior. But at the same time, I look at the way he challenged society, the way he stood up and was like, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. He went on that, I think he went on Maury Povich or something like that. And basically he just was like, yeah, if you don't like me, this is who I am. I am a crazy sociopathic animal. And that's it. That's all I am. And there's something like really satisfying about that in a twisted way.
Hmm.
But man, all kinds of crazy maniacs. You go down the line of people who in the performing arts, and you just find some of the most ridiculous characters. Like 2 nights ago, I was chilling with my girl, and we watched the Tiny Tim documentary. You ever researched Tiny Tim?
I haven't researched him, but I've seen clips and I've heard him played in SpongeBob. So if this goes the dark route, I know that there's clips of it in SpongeBob to be referenced.
Dude, but so he was like, and of course he's famous for that one SpongeBob song, where he's the
Mm,
montage where he's making the Krabby Patty. But then he's also got like all these crazy. He like pops up throughout history and pop culture. He
mm,
like and the documentary sort of goes about how like for example, he's in Insidious with the Red Devil. That's him singing in the background. What is it? Tiptoe through the tulips, right?
yeah.
And he covers other people's songs. That was sort of his thing. He like took older songs and revamped them in like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s.
Mm,
But man, talk about somebody who was a torture artist, dude. He was this sort of like, and this blew my mind because you think of the dude as like a twink type character that probably couldn't get laid if he wanted to. He was a
mm,
womanizer. He was fucking like crazy, and he married a woman. He had this like really weird Christian, like old school biblical style of what he thought a woman should be,
mm.
and so he would just like berate his females and stuff like that. And he'd be this crazy womanizer. He he like was addicted to all these weird things like drinking vinegar, and he got crazy fat towards the end of his life. I think he had diabetes, but I think he died of like an embolism or a heart attack or something like that. And
Jesus.
yeah, you just there's another guy in like maybe not the GGL category, but like
Mm.
close to that, and like the insanity level. You're like, holy shit! And I think it's important to mention while we're on this topic about how not everybody has to be that guy in the arts world. You
Yeah,
know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
you can be the Weird Al, which is just a step below Tiny Tim. Without, I mean, we don't know yet. They haven't put out the Weird Al documentary, but we're pretty sure that it's a step below the Tiny Tim, where you're not doing all the evil shit, but you're still like just as much of an entertainment crazy head
Mm-hmm.
without the real life person being insane. You know?
Exactly. I've also noticed a shift, and I know you probably picked up on this too in the past few years, where the the facade of people is starting to fade. And what I mean by that is like back in the day, it was very easy to have like a professional facade. It's very easy to be like, oh, I'm Jimi Hendrix, the artist, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, my birth name is this, and I pay my taxes, and I went to high school, and you know, like they do all the basic shit that the whole world did. And I feel like over the years, that idea is sort of starting to fade away. Where like we want our artists to be more human and more regular. Have you noticed that sort of shift?
Oh yeah, I think it's almost incapable for most up and coming artists, if not all current artists, to remain some kind of fake character, because there is the demand for them to be making constant content and making real like human interactions and stuff like that. And the thing is, it's similar to the whole crazy people with Gigi Allen. Like if you have a person who's a crazy person outside of their art, but they're a very normal person in their art, it creates this just horrible twisted view of people, and that's why people really want to get to the heart of people. Because like when you get like guys like Bill Cosby, where you know if it's like you're judging people based on their art or you're judging people based on their person. I mean, he was the cleanest cut comedian, like one of the most like he would call people up on the phone to tell them stop cursing because you just couldn't curse, but he was like drugging and like doing all these terrible things to women. Like
Dude.
that's like separating the art from the artist, but like you got to combine them and have like real people so people know what they're getting into and like who they're supporting and like what makes what they're doing funny or interesting. You know, like why is this musician such an interesting character? Is it because they've made all these stories and like told these things, or is it because they're living this life that's like really true to who they are? You know.
Mm-hmm. That's what people really resonate with. I've found is like the true to who you are. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I think is becoming more and more popular, but it's still super lacking in the arts. You know what I mean? This sort of idea that you don't have to be anything more than you actually are. You know, at the heart of it, it's the popular part of somebody like, for example, like Travis Scott, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the mystique is part of the popular part, but also the idea that like, oh, you can follow this person now. You can go on his social media and you could potentially talk to him. A lot of these comedians are the same way. You know, you follow like I don't know if you watch Your Mom's House.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, you could ostensibly go talk to Tom Segura and Christina P. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? But these are like real people, and the real people are sort of rising to the top. You know what I mean? Whereas the facades of the characters that we sort of associated with art are starting to fade away in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
And with that comes, okay, the people that really were batshit crazy we're sort of seeing how batshit crazy they were. And that goes both ways, you know, good and bad. You see, for example, like a Bill Cosby, right? Oh yeah, he actually was a horrible piece of shit, and that's sort of rising to the top now. You know, he can call up Eddie Murphy, like you said, as much as he wants, and be like, "You shouldn't." What was that? What was the joke that Eddie Murphy said about it?
Oh, I'm trying to think. The one he told on stage that he called him about, or
Yeah, so he did a bit about how Bill Cosby called him
mm,
and was like, "You can't say fuck." And that was it, right?
yeah.
Man, it's a classic right there, dude. That's and yeah, it's just a funny thing to me how the mystique of art is sort of starting to go away, and I think with that is kind of coming. I think a lot of the industry is going away too. You know what I mean? I think the mystique in the industry sort of went hand in hand. Now you can't sell records
Yeah,
anymore.
well,
Oh,
mhm.
go
The
ahead, go ahead.
mystique was part of the industry. Yeah, I mean, they controlled the image, so that's why they were able to fake all this stuff. Is because they weren't the ones putting out their narrative. So
Hmm.
now it's in the individual's hands to put out their own content and to make themselves the artists they are. So they no longer are under scripts or having stuff written for them. So they have to become their own person for like a public face.
Totally. Now, obviously, you're trying to break into the field of comedy and the field of music.
Mm.
So you're one of these people that has to produce constant content. You know, like you got to be feeding the audience 100%. Otherwise, they'll lose interest and move on to something else. So how do you? What's your strategy for going about that? You know, like how do you do it every? Do you have to structure it, or do you just kind of randomly throw everything you do on social media? Like, what's your take on that?
I honestly am not gotten into great with social media just yet. I've mostly been trying to just workshop live shows, especially with comedy, and trying to get just like a lot of music out first before I start getting a lot of promotion for it ready. Because I don't think it's at the level where I would want it to be for pushing it to the next spot. You know, I think it's definitely getting good and it's definitely there, but I just know that there's so many levels and there's so much room to work, and especially with comedy. I mean, like the only way to get practice and the only way to get better is to do it live. So like everything you can think of, and every time you practice at home or write at home, it's really not doing anything to increase your craft. It's just kind of like getting you a little bit more excited for the next show. So a
Mm,
lot of it is just like staying at it and like being to as many shows as you can and trying to go to different shows. Like these days, there's Zoom open mics, there's Zoom stand up shows, there's mics in the park, there's underground shows, there's like secret shows that you got to go to and like pretend you're going to church. Like it's like a legal exception that like some of these comedy clubs can like register themselves as like the school of comedyology or whatever, like humorology religion.
no
So you can
way.
go in for like these church sessions and you're like you're a pastor, but you're just shitting around and telling all your different stories, and it has nothing to do with any sort of God, but it's humorology and whatnot. So just staying on top of
Wow.
it and like find all the different venues and ways you can stay working pretty much.
Dude, that's the humorology thing blows my mind. So there's actually like clubs in New York that are branding themselves as churches.
Yeah, they're slowly trying to get that. Well, they're mostly being prepared for the future. Like if stuff does get locked down again, they're like branding themselves as these like you know places of worship, so you can go there and worship comedy.
Dude, I would go worship comedy. Sign me up. Of
Yeah.
all the world religions I've seen, man, comedy can be my religion. I'll sign up. That's dope. It's funny too, like the looseness of the term religion. You could essentially do anything with the term religion. You know, it's been so um I don't want to say corrupted, but watered down to the point where that's, I mean, if it's what you got to do to keep the comedy clubs open, do it. You know what I mean? There's no shame in that. People, I don't get this the lockdown thing, man. If I'm being honest, I think we tried it and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we doing to this? Especially in New York, like I feel like it's a city of young people. I'm not saying that people didn't die from coronavirus, but I'm also saying like, man, I don't know if the economy can take another hit like this. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely. Yeah, it seems like either they go into like a full lockdown, like super lockdown, can't leave your house, can't go outside to get the newspaper or whatnot, or like the more concessions they make and the more like smallest like things they allow you to do, the less it makes sense to stop you from doing too many other things. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you can still go out and go sit in a restaurant, then what's the difference between sitting in the restaurant eating food and then sitting there and listening to music? But like one of them is not allowed and the other one's not. The other one is, and it's
Yeah.
just these small concessions that we keep making that really make so many contradictions in this lockdown and so many uncertainties. And then like the whole thing with like limiting numbers of gatherings, but then not checking on it and stuff like that. It's just I feel like they really should either go all the way with locking it down and like, I think if they did it for 2 weeks and really kept everyone in their houses, drones, chip everyone up, whatever you got to do, make sure they're not leaving their houses. Like, I'll sign up. No questions here. Put a VR headset on me. I'll live in there for 2 weeks or whatever I got to do. But
That
if
does
they're
not
not going to
sound good
stop
to me.
people from going to too many places, then I feel like they should allow a couple more, at least entertainment routes, if they're going to still have these functionality things that are still open.
It's true, man. And like you said, there's one effective method of lockdown. That's full lockdown. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can't have this like pseudo pause with all these stupid arbitrary rules, and you can tell the politicians don't really give a shit. Like there's that famous thing that went around of the governor of California out there who went to that like 14-person party or whatever it was at this famous restaurant, and everybody's talked about this at this point. But it's like, well, all right, so what is it really for? Is it for the protection of the people? Because obviously, if the politicians don't want to follow it, then what are we following it for?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's and like you said, like they're drawing all these artificial lines between okay, um, musicians aren't allowed to perform, but you can go eat at a restaurant. That's like okay, it's one other body, and he's in the room, and it's just sound. There's no like, you know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's the rules don't, and the vaccination we can't wait 100,000 years for. You know, it's which we're gonna end up. You know, the vaccine is gonna what? It's gonna get out to the government, then the rich people, and then the middle class, you know, and the starving artist types like you and I are going to get it last. So we're going to be out of the job for the longest and we need the money the most. It's ridiculous. But I don't know. They'll turn it around hopefully one of these days. But
Yeah, I think they're saying they're making some pretty good strides in the vaccines, and I think one of the funny things that's kind of terrible but also kind of good at this point is like there's a lot of competition between who wants to be the company that gets it. So like that's kind of one of the things that's like inspiring people to actually go out and do it is like they want to be the company that got the coronavirus vaccine. Like they want to be the winners.
mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like this competition mentality that might actually be what gets us a successful vaccine on a quicker side is like all these people competing to be the ones to get it. And it sounds like, everyone's putting out numbers. I'm definitely not a scientist by any stretch, but it sounds like they're getting pretty close and they might get like emergency clearances or whatever. So we'll see.
There's Johnson and Johnson and Pfizer and all those. Pfizer.
Mm-hmm.
Pfizer.
Yeah, yeah, I think they could definitely use a rebrand of the name, but
Right? Everybody's quick to just brush them off because they're Pfizer. There's actually another thing you said a couple minutes ago when we're talking about this with the like having the lockdown but not enforcing it is hilarious to me. Like for example, in where I live, Saratoga County, the sheriff put out like a public letter that was like, yeah, we know that the governor made this whole rule about Thanksgiving, but we don't have the manpower to enforce it. So basically the letter said like, I don't know, do what you want to do. Like, how are we going to send a cop to every single household in the whole county? It's ridiculous, So the method of enforcing it has become, it's sort of fallen on every other person, right? It's fallen on like the citizen to enforce the rules, and that's become a really annoying thing too. Where I've noticed like that's where you get all the virtue signal people that like to come out and be like, you're not wearing your mask.
yeah.
They're complaining at you, and it's like, man, when you give people the power to sort of bitch at other people and peer pressure them into doing shit they don't want to do, that's another problem.
But it could also be good if we started doing that for a lot of other things. You know what I mean? If they just kind of like gave all the policing power to just like peer pressure, I'd be pretty fine with that, honestly. Like if they just stopped arresting people for like drugs and shit, and they were just like, "You're not supposed to do that," and like other people are probably gonna bitch at you for doing it, but like, it's up to you. You probably shouldn't do it. And then like they just slowly do that with like all the laws, and maybe we're in a little bit better of a situation. You can kind of do whatever you want, but like you'll be judged for it and stuff like that, which it almost should be, right? Like you can kind of murder people, but like just probably don't do it because people are gonna give you like bad looks in public and stuff like that.
Yeah, that could work, like a low-level anarchy type of situation where like
Mm-hmm.
it's based on judgment. But I feel like other cultures have tried that and failed. Like, you know, ones that come to mind are like China. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? I feel like other cultures have tried the judgment as a social norm type of situation, and it's really like it. First of all, puts a damper on the arts because then if you do
Mhm.
something GG Allen crazy, then you like the whole societal punishment for that is the judgment. So you really get clamped. You know what I mean? But I mean,
Well,
you're right. It could, in a mild sort of sense, maybe it could work to sort of
mhm.
make people. But then again, I don't like to conform. I'm a
Yeah.
crazy person too. If I'm the type, and I know almost everybody in the arts world is that when you're told a rule, you're like, I don't want that rule.
Yeah, just
And
make
there's
it a
some,
little easier to break it.
yeah, and there's some rules you stick with, like wear a mask just so that people don't lose their shit every time they see you. But other rules, like everybody's got to get a vaccine, I'm like, I'll get the second wave of vaccines. I
Yeah,
feel like
you're gonna be up front.
I feel like the first ones, I don't know. Like I'm not an anti-vax guy. I get my flu shot every year, but
Hmm.
I I saw what happened with what's it called, swine flu. You know how like the vaccine made more people sick than the actual disease did. And I'm like,
Hmm.
not 100% on that one. I'm kind of lukewarm, but
I don't know. I'm definitely gonna be up front, first of the line. I don't care if they're putting a microchip in it. I mean, microchip me up. I don't care. Freaking,
you
I'll
put a
take whatever they're
microchip.
putting in. Yeah, I'll take a microchip. It's telling you, Elon Musk is gonna have it in like a few years. It's called the Neuralink. He's already ready. But
That's true.
I'll take whatever chemicals they're putting in there as long as it's FDA approved. Honestly, like worst case scenario, you try out a bag drug. Like who hasn't done that before? You know. So
I guess you got a point, but yeah, I'm not with the whole human engineering shit. But I mean, at the same time, if you do get the vaccine early, you're the first one that can like go out and do a show, for example, or go out and
mhm.
go to the grocery store and not wear a mask. So maybe it's worth a consideration at some
Yeah,
point.
and then if you get sick, that's a story you have for life. You're like, oh, I grew a third arm back in 2020 when I took this shitty vaccine. Like, that's also a big plus. Not many people will have that if it's not
Dude,
readily available.
could you imagine that you grow a new arm every time they give you the vaccine? So there'd be like if it's a yearly one, you'd
I
have
would
dudes
take it
walking around
out
like eight
5 times.
arms.
Yeah. Sports would be a lot more interesting at that point, honestly. You
Dude,
know,
yes. If you had it,
basketball, football, you can shoot the ball like 3 times in a row.
do you think that that's where sports is going? Is like soon we'll have augmentation sports where like goalies in soccer have a hand or a foot like on the top of their head, or
It
like
should be. I don't know why they stop people from using steroids and stuff. That's crazy. We
yeah,
should be seeing people put whatever they can into them to do anything they can in these sports. Like they're getting paid millions of dollars. You're telling me you wouldn't take a couple of steroids for a couple like $100 million? You wouldn't like take a chance on some weird steroids and like hit someone at full speed? No, that's crazy. Like people should
exactly.
be able to do whatever to see how far we can push that shit.
Dude, yeah, like they got mad at LeBron for HGH, I think.
Hmm.
And it's like, who gives a fuck, dude?
Right?
It's a naturally occurring hormone. All right, yeah, he takes an illegal substance. Okay, but like, did you watch that game? Did you watch LeBron play? It's
Yeah,
crazy.
all about the stats. I don't care if you're putting kryptonite in his body. Let the man shoot.
For real, man, dude. I'm I'm with that legalization of drugs too, and I know you are.
Legalize everything.
Legalize everything. So what do you think is like, and you're with everything, right? Like I know we talked about this last time. You're down for legalized heroin to weed, like the whole
Yeah,
spectrum of drugs.
they just started that out in Washington or Oregon or one of those places. Um,
Really?
the thing is, when they legalize it, or at least just decriminalize it, you open the floor for rehabilitation centers, and like the version of like a methadone clinic where you can like slowly get people off it, and it makes a safer environment for them to buy it. Like pretty much every aspect of it becomes a little bit safer because like if you can buy heroin from Walmart as opposed to like the guy who probably is going to kill you every time you buy it from him, it's like a little bit safer. And then like if you want to tell someone that you have a problem with it, it's a lot easier to be like, oh, I got to stop going to Walmart than like, oh, I've got to stop, taking my car out to another state to like go under an overpass or whatever the fuck they're doing to get it now. You know what I mean? At least make it a little bit safer on each end to start to stop. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. And I mean, so who brought this up? I think it might have been Carlin back in the day. Some comedian that was like, they don't want you to use your drugs; they want you to use their drugs, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
in that the reason that the drugs are illegal is because of the pharmaceutical lobbyists. The reason that they're illegal is because if you had access to something like it, like you and I obviously wouldn't go shoot up heroin, at least I hope. but but like if you and I had access to like pot, for example, a lot of our like aches and pains or depression, anxiety, or whatever ailments people of our generation are having right now would be gone. We
Mhm.
wouldn't have to take Xanax. We wouldn't have to take, you know, Adderall. We wouldn't have to take all these crazy drugs to feel normal. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I think there's a pretty solid argument to be made there. I think you know I I'm not sure about like the hardest core drugs being legal, as in like fentanyl and like all these like crazy street drugs that are killing people right now. But definitely up to a certain point, like yeah, let them have coke, let them have weed. Who cares? It's not bothering you. And when's the
Yeah.
last time your house got invaded by a crackhead? Like, I mean, it might have
Maybe something for some people, but
for some people, but
yeah, but
eh, maybe that's a privileged position to
yeah.
say that. But at the same time, like you said, there's a lot of benefits, like the research that could be done, like the clinical studies and stuff to sort of, like they're doing fascinating tests on somebody's podcast I was listening to. They invited somebody who's using Molly as like a means to help soldiers with PTSD.
Hmm.
That's fucking wild. That's groundbreaking because that becomes a
That's a hard
medicine now.
thing to treat.
Yeah, it's not just something that people at a rave are doing, even though you can do it at a rave. It
Mm.
becomes something that the world could use to really rehabilitate a lot of people. So, yeah, I think I'm with that too, man. I think that up to a certain extent, like, why not? Fuck it.
Hmm. Leave it in the hands of the people to make that choice for themselves, as opposed to kind of making it for them beforehand and let them find out why not or why to.
Yeah. And I think that personal liberty, bringing this back to art, that personal liberty goes hand in hand with being an artist. You know what I mean? That the empowerment of the individual, I think really, and it's something talked about in the book that I mentioned to you, the empowerment of the individual really allowed the artistic expressions like music and comedy and poetry and movies and videos to just like exponentially rise. Because
Mm.
when people are free to sort of explore themselves without any sort of external body telling them you have to do this, you have to be this, you have to act like this, you can really start to figure out what's actually going on. And on the flip side, it becomes a little bit more confusing because now you have no frame of reference. Now you're free.
Hmm.
Freedom can be a curse, according to Sartre, but like still, it allows you to at least make the inquiry instead of just assuming that the world is a certain type of way. So,
Exactly.
yeah. I'm with that, man. I think the personal freedom shit is important to me, and I know it's important to you as well.
Hmm. You shouldn't have to pay a penalty for something that there ended up not being anything wrong with in an individual situation, even though the penalty is that there could have been something wrong. Doesn't mean you always have to pay the penalty for what could have been if it didn't happen.
That's a fact, man. And it makes me man, I gotta admit, I'm super nervous to try it, but I really do want to try it as mushrooms one day.
Oh, you got it. That's top tier.
Dude, tell me about what it's like. I want to know.
Yeah, I mean everyone experiences it in their own way, so it's like kind of impossible to like to guess or what would happen, but pretty much just like any other psychedelics where it's just like very introspective and extrospective at the same time, and a lot of different weird visuals. Sometimes it's just you can just have like a silly ass thing where you're like, oh, my electric socket's probably gonna kill me tonight, but I'm pretty cool with that. I'm just gonna like ride it out. Maybe I'll drink some orange juice and paint some crayons or whatever. And then the next time you do it, you're like, oh, I think I'm pretty sure exactly what the universe is doing and what it's saying. And then you find out that the answer was that something simple, or it was something really extreme. You never know.
Damn, man. That's I got the opportunity one time to do it. And I know like with the rules psychedelics, it's like you gotta wait for it to come to you. You can't go seeking it out. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why I didn't do it. I think I was honestly just a bitch. Like I was just a little bit nervous. I College was the perfect time when I should have done it and I didn't because I feel like it would have helped me out a lot, with the binge drinking, with the crazy behavior. But but it's definitely in my cards at some point in my life. I do want to like just try it one time just to see what it's like. And I feel like everybody should try everything at a certain point, you know,
Hmm.
that they're willing to try. I don't know when that point's gonna be, but I'm willing to let the universe just bring it my way, and eventually I'll get there. You know.
Exactly. It'll, you know, if you're in the right situation, you're in the right situation. If not, if you're a little uneasy, then it's probably not the right time because some uneasy shit is gonna happen. So you got to be ready to be easy for it to be easy.
Have you ever like tried anything else besides mushrooms that you'd like to talk about over the air? Or?
On air, I think that's definitely what I'm gonna go with.
Word. I don't incriminate yourself. You know what I mean.
Yeah,
I want to be losing their job over this podcast, but it's I want to try it at a festival one of these times, like
hmm
Bonnaroo or something like, you know, some sort of arts festival, anything like that. You know, some place where like there's other people who are kindred spirits. You know, I don't want to run the possibility of running into a cop or something like that. It's gonna freak me out. 'Cause, man, I remember at school, for example, we were into cops all the time, just smoking weed, and you would like lose your mind and like tense up and run away. Like, ah!
yeah. They weren't even real cops. They were like campus cops, but it still felt like the same thing.
Yeah, it felt like the end of the world. It felt like you were getting chased by a bear. You were just like
Yeah,
running away.
but at music festivals, I mean, like that stuff is pretty much designed for people to be on drugs. Like everything, it's like almost the same thing as kid proofing a place is the same thing as like drug proofing a place. You know what I mean? You make it like impossible for you to fuck up or get hurt. You know what I mean? They have water stations everywhere because they know people who are on drugs are not thinking about that shit, and they know the kids aren't thinking about that shit when they're running around. You know, it's like almost the same kind of proofing and stuff you got to ready for at festivals. They're kind of like getting you ready, you know, on a safety level. And then on a person to person level, everyone's just there to like have a good time and like listen to music and shit like that. So like no one's like there to like start fights or like attack people. You know what I mean? So pretty much safe environments for all that stuff.
For real. You got to be careful which music festival you go to. You got to go to one of the hippie ones. You can't go with like metal festival and expect that you're gonna have a good time on mushrooms. You know what I mean?
Yeah, unless you're into metal music, then maybe
that's
that's perfect
that's
place to do mushrooms.
dude. So I want to ask you about like specifically about your producing style, right? Because I've listened to a lot of your productions. It's great shit. It's amazing. Like you go from hip hop all over the spectrum of different types of music.
Mhm.
Um, Now, when you step in the studio, like, do you have a preferred software that you use?
Yeah, I usually use FL Studio, definitely.
Word.
Mostly just because like I feel like when you use different DAWs, like it's just about how comfortable you are with the software, and how much you can do stuff quick with like quick commands and stuff like that. So FL just tends to be the one that I can run the best, and I also just have like a lot of plugins for it, so it just makes it a lot easier to kind of make stuff off the fly and to pitch up and to smooth out stuff like as I'm going through, as opposed to trying to like fiddle with other ones. But FL definitely tends to be my main.
Word. And you use like any particular like sort of hardware to go with that, like MIDI keyboard, or do you have like a studio setup that you're working in, or it's just like a bedroom?
Usually I'll kind of half and half. If I'm recording instruments, it's pretty much just like DI interface to laptop and just kind of like getting all my recordings out, and
Mm-hmm.
then going back and using like studio headphones or whatever to just kind of like pitch it in. And I have like a MIDI keyboard and like studio monitors and stuff that I'll use if I'm trying to like really get like a full production setup in. But when it comes to just recording and like composition, it's usually just like laptop and sheet music software and stuff like that first, and then
Word, man.
finishing it all up after.
That's crazy. It's a lot of fun for me. I geek out when I hear people talk about like hardware and software and stuff like that, because I'm deep down I'm the music nerd. You know what I mean? I like to see what everybody's doing with their particular style. Um, what is like what's your method of releasing these type of things, you know, like be it music or any sort of artistic thing that you do? Like, do you promote it at all? And I know you said like you're not totally on social media right yet, but like, is there a way besides live shows that you choose to promote it, or is it just kind of live shows at this point?
Sometimes it's I'll do a little bit of promotion here and there online, but mostly I try to just do like just try to drop it and see what happens with it. sometimes just to see what the natural numbers are going to be on some of like the smaller songs and stuff that I'll put out. But if I'm doing it for like another artist or something like that, and I'm not putting it on my name, then I'll definitely try to go out and like reach out to different promoters and stuff like that, or just like different accounts and try to get like some brand association stuff like that, and just kind of make connections like that. But if I'm putting out my own stuff under my own name, I'll definitely usually just kind of like put out like a little word that I'm going to drop it or something like that.
Word. That's fucking awesome, man. Dude, we're an hour in. I can't believe I looked down at the time. I was like, oh my God. I couldn't believe it. So look, man, real quick, before we get going, you want to give me like, tell the world where they can find you, your social media, where you find your music, your comedy. What's in your repertoire? What do you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, check out my Spotify and Apple Music. I'm on all stream platforms. I worked with one of my friends from home. Our artist album name is Polky, and our album is Looking Forward to the Past. Check out Chester Eastmain. That's my brother's group. They do a lot of great stuff. And then if you're looking for my comedy, just show up to any park in the city, and I might just be barking at random people and just telling jokes to the skies. We also do it on rooftops, sometimes the back of like a seedy bar. Just kind of run around the city. You might find me somewhere. And that's the main ticket. It's just kind of spot about,
You heard it here, folks. Just wander around the city and you'll eventually run into this dude. He's everywhere. All right. Thank you very much. Anthony McHale. Shout out to you. Shout out Chester East Maine. Shout out the whole comedy scene down in New York. And let's have you back on the podcast soon, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Hell yeah, brother. Take care.
Take care. Great seeing you.